The bank teller's fingers hesitated over the keyboard as I pushed the withdrawal slip across the marble counter. Her eyes widened when she saw the amount, $450,000. My entire life savings. Every penny I'd scraped together from 43 years of teaching high school mathematics. Mrs. Chen, this is quite a substantial withdrawal, she whispered, glancing around nervously. Are you certain about this amount? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I nodded, my hands trembling slightly as I gripped my worn leather purse. It's for my daughter. She's finally found her dream house. What I didn't tell the teller was how Emma had cried on the phone 3 weeks ago, her voice breaking as she described the perfect Victorian home in Portland. Mom, I'm so close to having enough for the down payment, but I'm still short. The sellers won't wait. And if I lose this house... Her sob had cut through me like a knife. I've been saving for 8 years, working 2 jobs, but it's just not enough. The teller printed out the cashier's check, her movements careful and deliberate. $450,000 made out to Emma Chen Williams. Every dollar I'd ever saved, every vacation I'd skipped, every luxury I'd denied myself. All of it flowing toward my daughter's happiness. As I walked out of First National Bank that Tuesday morning, the autumn wind cutting through my thin cardigan, I felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. At 68, I was starting over financially. But Emma would have her dream home. My beautiful, brilliant daughter who'd graduated summa cum laude from Stanford, who'd built a successful career in graphic design, who'd married her college sweetheart Michael, she deserved this gift. The drive to FedEx took 12 minutes through downtown Sacramento. I'd measured it twice the day before, wanting everything perfect. The cashier's check sat in a protective envelope, along with a handwritten note I'd labored over for hours. My dearest Emma, this represents every penny I've saved throughout my career, but I can think of no better investment than your happiness. You've worked so hard for this dream, and I want to help make it come true. Consider this my early inheritance to you. Use it wisely and enjoy every moment in your new home. All my love. Mom, the FedEx clerk, a young man with kind eyes, promised overnight delivery. She'll have it by 10:30 a.m. tomorrow, guaranteed. I drove home to my small apartment above Mrs. Patterson's garage, my heart light despite my empty bank account. Emma would call tomorrow evening, probably crying with joy and gratitude. We'd talk about furniture shopping, about which room would be her art studio, about holiday gatherings in her new home. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But tomorrow evening came and went without a call. I tried reaching Emma on Thursday, my fingers dialing her number with practiced ease. The phone rang twice before going straight to voicemail. Hi, you've reached Emma. Leave a message and I'll get back to you. Sweetheart, it's Mom. I hope you received my package. I'm so excited to hear about the house. Call me when you get a chance. Friday. No return call. I tried again, my worry beginning to gnaw at the edges of my contentment. Saturday morning. I couldn't stand it anymore. I called Michael's number, the one Emma had given me years ago for emergencies. Hello? His voice sounded strained, distant. Michael, it's Barbara, Emma's mother. I've been trying to reach her about the house purchase, but she hasn't returned my calls. Is everything all right? A long pause. Too long. Mrs. Chen, Emma's. She's been very busy with the move and everything. I'll tell her you called. The line went dead. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Something was wrong. In all the years since Emma had gotten married, Michael had never been anything but warm and chatty with me. He'd always called me Mom Barbara and asked about my garden, my students, my life. This stilted, formal conversation felt like talking to a stranger. I spent the weekend pacing my small apartment, checking my phone every few minutes. By Monday, I was desperate enough to drive by Emma's old apartment complex, the one she'd lived in before supposedly buying the house. Her car wasn't there, but that meant nothing. She could have already moved. Tuesday marked 1 week since I'd sent the money. I called Emma's work number, something I'd never done before. Chen Design Studios. This is Melissa. Hello, I'm looking for Emma Chen Williams. This is her mother. Another pause. I'm sorry, but she's not available right now. Can I take a message? When will she be available? I'm not sure. I'll have to get back to you. I left my name and number, but no one called back. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Each day brought the same routine. Unanswered calls, voicemails that went unreturned, a growing certainty that something terrible had happened. By the second week, I was calling daily, first Emma's number, then Michael's, then her work. The responses became increasingly cold, increasingly final. Please stop calling here, Melissa finally said on Monday of the third week. Emma has made it clear she doesn't want to speak with you. The words hit me like a physical blow. I don't understand. What did I do? I just want to know if she got the money safely. Mrs. Chen, I'm going to hang up now. I stared at my phone for a long time after the dial tone started. Doesn't want to speak with me. The phrase echoed in my mind like a mantra of rejection. That evening, I tried Emma's number one more time. This time, an automated message greeted, "Me. The number you have dialed has been disconnected or is no longer in service." She'd changed her number. The realization sent me to my knees on the threadbare carpet of my living room. My daughter, my only child, my greatest joy, had taken my life savings and then erased me from her life like I'd never existed. I spent that night awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to understand. Had I somehow offended her? Was it the note I'd included with the money? Had I been too presumptuous, too assuming? Maybe she'd wanted to achieve her dream on her own, and my gift had felt like a judgment of her abilities. The next morning, I drove to the post office and filed a trace request on the FedEx package. The tracking showed it had been delivered and signed for by E. Williams at Emma's old address. She'd received it. She'd taken the money. And then she'd disappeared. 3 weeks became a month. A month became 2. I hired a private investigator, a tired-looking man named Rodriguez who took my case with the weary expression of someone who'd seen too many family dramas. I found some information, he said when he called 6 weeks later. Your daughter and her husband bought a house in Portland, Oregon. Paid cash, $450,000. My money, my entire life savings. She'd used it exactly as she'd said she would, but then she'd vanished. There's more, Rodriguez continued. I found social media posts. They're calling themselves the Williams family now. No mention of Chen. And Mrs. Chen. They're posting about how they saved up for years to buy their dream home. No mention of any gift from family. I hung up the phone and cried for the first time since my husband had died 12 years earlier. Deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to tear something essential out of my chest. Emma had not only taken my money, she'd stolen the credit for her achievement. In her Instagram posts, which Rodriguez had screenshotted, she and Michael posed in front of their beautiful new home with captions about hard work paying off and achieving our dreams through determination and sacrifice. My sacrifice. My determination. My life's work funding their dream while they presented it as their own triumph. The months that followed blurred together in a haze of confusion and heartbreak. I stopped teaching. My savings gone. I needed to find work that paid better than a teacher's pension. At 68, I took a job at a grocery store, bagging groceries and retrieving shopping carts from the parking lot. My former colleagues from Roosevelt High School would sometimes come through my checkout line, their eyes filled with pity and confusion. Barbara, What are you doing here? Where's Emma? I thought she was doing so well. I developed a repertoire of vague responses. Oh, you know how it is. Keeping busy. Emma's doing wonderfully. What could I tell them? That my daughter had robbed me and then erased me from her life? That I was 68 years old and stocking shelves because I'd given everything to someone who now pretended I didn't exist? The private investigator had found Emma's new address in Portland. But what was the point? She'd made her choice clear. She'd blocked my old number, refused my calls to her work, and created a new life where I simply didn't exist. But on quiet nights in my small apartment, eating dinner alone while the television provided background noise, I couldn't stop thinking about her. About the little girl who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd saved her allowance to buy me a Mother's Day gift when she was 7, who'd called me every Sunday throughout college just to talk. Where had that Emma gone? When? Had my daughter become someone who could take everything from me and then pretend I'd never existed? The answer came 6 months later, on a Tuesday that started like any other. I was restocking the cereal aisle when my manager, Derek, approached, with an uncomfortable expression. "Barbara, there's someone here to see you. Says it's important." My heart leaped. Emma. She'd come to explain, to apologize, to make things right. But the woman standing near customer service wasn't Emma. She was young, maybe 30, with short brown hair and an earnest expression that reminded me of my former students. "Mrs. Chen? Barbara Chen?" I nodded, my hand still holding a box of cornflakes. "My name is Jessica Martinez. I'm a social worker with Oregon Child Protective Services." She glanced around the store, then back to me. "Is there somewhere private we can talk?" The employee break room smelled like instant coffee and disinfectant. Jessica sat across from me at the scarred table, her expression gentle but serious. "Mrs. Chen, I need to ask you about your daughter, Emma Chen Williams, and her husband, Michael." Williams. My blood went cold. "Is Emma okay? Has something happened?" "Your daughter and son-in-law are fine physically. But Mrs. Chen, we've removed their children from their home." Children. Plural. I don't understand. Emma doesn't have children." Jessica's eyebrows rose. "Mrs. Chen, your daughter has 2 children. A 4-year-old daughter named Sophie and a 2-year-old son named Daniel. They've been living with Emma and Michael for the past 6 months." The cereal box slipped from my hands, hitting the floor with a hollow thud. Emma had children, my grandchildren, and I'd never known they existed. "We removed the children yesterday due to concerns about neglect and substance abuse," Jessica continued quietly. "Mrs. Chen, we're looking for appropriate family placement, and your name came up during our investigation." "My name? But how did you—" "Emma blocked my number. She won't speak to me." Jessica pulled out a tablet, scrolling through what looked like case notes. During our interviews with the neighbors, several people mentioned that Emma used to talk about her mother, about how much money her mother had given them for their house. When we pressed for details, we discovered that you exist, but have been estranged from your daughter for some time. She looked up at me with those earnest eyes. "Mrs. Chen, we need to know. Would you be willing to undergo a background check and home study to potentially care for your grandchildren?" The room spun around me. Grandchildren I'd never met. Emma in trouble. Children in need of a home. "Yes," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Yes, of course." Jessica made a note on her tablet. "There's something else, Mrs. Chen. Something you need to know before you decide." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The house your daughter is living in, the one purchased with your money, it's been under surveillance by local police for several months. There have been allegations of drug activity, parties that disturb the peace, and concerning behavior regarding the children's welfare. My perfect daughter. My brilliant Emma. The girl who'd graduated summa cum laude and built A successful career was apparently living a life I couldn't have imagined in my worst nightmares. Mrs. Chen, when was the last time you spoke to your daughter? I thought back to that phone call 8 months ago when she'd cried about needing money for her dream house. The last time I'd heard her voice had been when she was begging me for help. 8 months ago, she called asking for money for a house down payment. I sent her my entire life savings. Then she blocked my number and disappeared. Jessica's pen stilled on her tablet. $450,000? Yes, every penny I'd saved over 43 years of teaching. The social worker's expression shifted, becoming something between sympathy and alarm. Mrs. Chen, I need to tell you something about that house purchase. According to our investigation, your daughter and her husband didn't buy that house as a family home. They bought it specifically to run a high-end party rental and other activities. The neighbors have complained about noise, drugs, and inappropriate behavior around the children. She leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Mrs. Chen, your life savings didn't buy your daughter a dream home. It bought her a party house where she's been endangering her children. The words hit me like a physical blow. All those months of wondering what I'd done wrong, of assuming I'd somehow offended Emma with my gift, of believing that my daughter was living her dream in a beautiful home. It had all been a lie. The children, I managed to say. Are they safe? They're in temporary foster care right now, but they need a permanent placement. Mrs. Chen, these children have been asking about their grandmother. According to their statements, Emma used to tell them stories about Grandma Barbara who lived far away but loved them very much. Emma had told them about me. Even while she was blocking my calls and erasing me from her public life, she'd been telling my grandchildren that I existed, that I loved them. When can I meet them? The question came out as barely a whisper. Jessica checked her tablet. If you're serious about this, we can start the process immediately. But Mrs. Chen, I have to warn you, this won't be easy. The children have been through trauma. They're confused and scared. And there's a good chance that caring for them means you'll have to confront your daughter in ways you might not be prepared for. I thought about my empty apartment, my job bagging groceries, my Social Security checks that barely covered my rent since I'd given away my savings. I thought about 8 months of silence, of wondering where I'd gone wrong, of crying myself to sleep while my daughter pretended I didn't exist. Then I thought about 2 children, my grandchildren, who needed someone to love them unconditionally. I want to meet them, I said, my voice stronger now. Today, if possible. Jessica smiled for the first time since she'd introduced herself. Let me make some calls. Mrs. Chen, I think those children are very lucky to have a grandmother like you. As she pulled out her phone, I stared down at my grocery store uniform, at my hands that smelled like cleaning products and disappointment. 8 months ago, I'd been a retired teacher with a comfortable nest egg and a daughter I was proud of. Now I was a minimum wage worker about to become the guardian of children I'd never met, whose mother had stolen my life savings and then vanished. But as Jessica's voice filled the break room with efficient professional phone calls about background, checks and home studies and visitation schedules, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 8 months. Hope. My grandchildren needed me. Emma might have erased me from her life, but she hadn't been able to erase me from theirs. Somewhere in a foster home across the state, 2 little ones were waiting for their Grandma Barbara. The woman who'd given everything and lost everything was about to discover that sometimes the most important gifts come disguised as the most painful losses. Jessica hung up her phone and turned back to me with a smile that transformed her tired face. Mrs. Chen, if you're ready, there's a little girl named Sophie who's been asking when she gets to meet the grandmother who tells the best bedtime stories. Emma had told them about my bedtime stories, even in the midst of whatever darkness had consumed her life. She'd remembered the way I used to read to her, the voices I'd create for different characters, the way I'd make up new endings when the original stories were too sad. I'm ready, I said, standing up and smoothing down my grocery store vest. I'm ready to meet my grandchildren. What I didn't know yet was that meeting Sophie and Daniel would set in motion a series of events that would force me to confront not just Emma's betrayal, but the deeper truth about what had really happened to my daughter in the months after she'd taken my money. The truth that would change everything I thought I knew about the woman who'd given birth to my grandchildren and then lost herself. So completely that she'd nearly lost them too. The Sunshine Children's Center sat on a quiet street in Salem, Oregon, its cheerful yellow facade belying the serious nature of what happened within its walls. Jessica had driven me here directly from the grocery store, my manager Derek surprisingly understanding when I'd explained I needed emergency family leave. Mrs. Chen, Jessica said as we sat in her Honda Civic outside the building. Before we go in, I need to prepare you for what you might see. Sophie and Daniel have been through significant trauma. They may be withdrawn, or clingy, or even hostile. Their behavior isn't a reflection of you. It's their way of protecting themselves. I nodded, my hand smoothing down the simple blue dress I'd changed into back at my apartment. It was the nicest thing I owned now, purchased from a thrift store 3 months ago for a former colleague's funeral. I'd wanted to look like a grandmother, not a grocery store clerk meeting her grandchildren for the first time. The intake coordinator, Mrs. Sullivan, greeted us at the front desk. She was a motherly woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and the efficient manner of someone who'd seen too many family crises. Mrs. Chen, the children are in our family visiting room. I should mention that Sophie has been asking about you repeatedly since Jessica called this morning. She seems to know quite a bit about her Grandma Barbara. My heart clenched. Emma had been telling them about me while simultaneously erasing me from her own life. What kind of psychological maze had my daughter been living in? The family visiting room was decorated to feel homey. Soft couches, children's books scattered on low tables, toys organized in colorful bins. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment I saw them. Sophie was sitting on a small chair by the window, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing a pink dress that looked like it had seen better days. She had Emma's eyes, large and dark and intelligent, but there was a wariness in them that no 4-year-old should possess. Daniel was on the floor nearby, playing with wooden blocks with the intense concentration that toddlers bring to their work. He looked exactly like Emma had at that age, all chubby cheeks and serious expression. He was wearing a shirt that was slightly too big and jeans with a small hole in the knee. Sophie, Daniel, Mrs. Sullivan said gently, I'd like you to meet someone very special. This is your Grandma Barbara. Sophie's head snapped up, her eyes widening as she took in my appearance. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the room, a grandmother and granddaughter meeting for the first time, both of us trying to reconcile reality with the stories we'd been told. Then Sophie slid off her chair and walked toward me, with careful, measured steps. Are you really my grandma? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The one who makes up stories about princesses who solve math problems. My throat closed completely. Emma had told her about the bedtime stories I used to create. Tales of Princess Patricia, who used algebra to save kingdoms, and Queen Quadratic, who spoke in mathematical equations. Stories I'd invented when Emma was small and struggling with math homework. Yes, sweetheart, I managed to say, kneeling down to Sophie's eye level. I'm really your Grandma Barbara. Sophie studied my face with the intensity of someone much older than 4. Mommy said you lived far away and couldn't visit because you were busy with important work. But Mrs. Jessica says Mommy wasn't telling the truth about lots of things. The matter-of-fact way she said it broke my heart. This little girl had already learned that the adults in her life weren't always honest. That reality often differed from what she was told. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, I said carefully. But I'm here now, and I'm very happy to meet you. Daniel had abandoned his blocks and toddled over to investigate. He looked up at me with curious eyes, then reached out and patted my knee with one chubby hand. Up, he said simply, raising his arms. I looked to Mrs. Sullivan, who nodded encouragingly. I lifted Daniel into my arms, and he immediately settled against my shoulder with the trusting nature of a child who hadn't yet learned to fear strangers. His hair smelled like baby shampoo and something indefinably sweet. "He likes you," Sophie observed, still watching me carefully. "He doesn't usually like new people. Mommy said that means he has good instincts, but I don't know what that means." For the next hour, I sat on the floor with my grandchildren, listening to Sophie's careful explanations of their toys and games, while Daniel explored my purse with the methodical thoroughness of a tiny detective. Sophie was clearly the protective, older sister, explaining Daniel's needs and preferences, with the authority of someone who'd been caring for him longer than any 4-year-old should. "Daniel doesn't like loud noises," Sophie told me as her brother played with my reading glasses. "Sometimes Mommy and Daddy's friends were really loud, and it made him cry. I would take him to my room and we'd hide under the covers until it got quiet." Mrs. Sullivan made a note on her clipboard while Jessica and I exchanged glances. The picture of Emma's life was becoming clearer and more disturbing. "Did you and Daniel spend a lot of time in your room?" I asked gently. Sophie nodded seriously. "Mommy said we needed to stay out of the way when the grown-ups were having their important meetings. Sometimes the meetings lasted all night, and we'd fall asleep on my bed together. Important meetings. My life savings had funded whatever those meetings were, and my grandchildren had hidden from them. When it was time to leave, Sophie surprised me by walking over and taking my hand. "Will you come back tomorrow?" she asked. "If you'd like me to, yes." "I would like that very much." "And Grandma Barbara?" "Yes, sweetheart?" "Can you bring one of your princess math stories? The ones Mommy told us about?" I promised I would. And as we walked to Jessica's car, I was already mentally composing a tale about Princess Sophie, who used her kindness to solve problems that math couldn't fix. The drive back to Sacramento was filled with practical discussions about background checks, home studies, and legal procedures. But my mind kept drifting back to Sophie's careful questions and Daniel's easy trust, to the way they'd seemed starved for attention and affection. "Jessica," I said as we neared my apartment, "what exactly happened at Emma's house? What made you remove the children?" Jessica was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. "Mrs. Chen, your daughter and her husband were running what we believe was a high-end party rental business out of their home. Wealthy clients would pay substantial amounts to use the house for private events that often involved drugs and other illegal activities." She pulled into my building's parking lot, but didn't turn off the engine. "The children were often left unsupervised during these events, sometimes for days at a time. Neighbors reported seeing Sophie trying to care for Daniel, a 4-year-old attempting to feed and change her 2-year-old brother, because the adults were either absent or too intoxicated to function. The image of tiny Sophie trying to mother her baby brother while Emma, my Emma, was somewhere else entirely, too drugged or drunk to care for her own children, made my stomach turn. How long had this been going on? Based on neighbor reports and police surveillance, approximately 6 months, right around the time they purchased the house. My money, my $450,000 had funded 6 months of child endangerment and criminal activity. "Mrs. Chen, there's something else you need to know. When we searched the house, we found evidence that your daughter has been using your financial gift to maintain a serious drug habit. The party business wasn't just about making money, it was about feeding her addiction." I stared through the windshield at my small apartment building, processing this information. My brilliant daughter, the Stanford graduate who'd called me, crying about her dream house, was a drug addict using my life savings to endanger her children. What happens now? Now, we begin the process of determining if you're suitable to care for Sophie and Daniel. The background check will take about a week, the home study another 2 weeks after that. If everything goes well, we can begin transitional visits where the children spend increasing amounts of time with you. Jessica handed me a thick folder of paperwork. "Mrs. Chen, I have to ask, are you prepared for this financially? Caring for 2 young children is expensive and your current income. She trailed off diplomatically, but I understood. My grocery store wages and small pension wouldn't stretch to cover 2 children's needs. I'll figure it out, I said firmly. They're my grandchildren. I'll make it work. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table surrounded by forms and requirements, calculating and recalculating my budget. Even with the assistance programs Jessica had mentioned, I would be living paycheck to paycheck. But as I looked around my sparse apartment, I realized something profound had shifted inside me. For 8 months, I'd been existing in a kind of emotional purgatory, grieving the loss of my daughter and the money I'd foolishly given away. I'd been a victim of Emma's choices, diminished and discarded. But now I had a purpose again. I began making lists. What the children would need. How I could rearrange my apartment to accommodate them, which shifts at the grocery store would work with childcare requirements. For the first time since Emma had disappeared from my life, I felt like myself again. The background check process was humbling but thorough. Detective Rodriguez, the same private investigator I'd hired months earlier to find Emma, called with an unexpected offer. Mrs. Chen, I heard through some contacts about your situation. I wanted you to know that I'd be happy to provide a character reference. And there's something else. I never charged you for all the work I did on your daughter's case. I couldn't bring myself to take money from someone who'd already lost so much. His kindness, coming from someone who barely knew me, highlighted the contrast with Emma's betrayal. Strangers were treating me with more consideration than my own daughter had. The home study social worker, Mrs. Patterson, ironically sharing a name with my elderly landlord, visited on a Thursday morning. She walked through my small apartment with professional detachment, measuring rooms and noting safety features. Mrs. Chen, this space is quite small for 3 people, she observed, making notes on her clipboard. I've been looking at 2-bedroom apartments, I replied. With the children's assistance benefits, I should be able to afford something larger. What I didn't mention was that I'd already visited 7 apartments that morning before my shift at the grocery store, each one stretching my budget to the breaking point. Mrs. Patterson interviewed me for 3 hours, asking questions about my parenting philosophy, my financial stability, my support system. Some questions were easy. Yes, I believed in consistent bedtimes and nutritious meals. Others cut deeper. Mrs. Chen, how do you feel about your daughter's situation? Are you angry with her? I considered the question carefully. I'm heartbroken for her. And yes, I'm angry about the choices she's made. But mostly, I'm focused on making sure Sophie and Daniel are safe and loved. What would you do if your daughter completed a rehabilitation program and wanted the children back? The question I'd been dreading. What would I do if Emma got clean and wanted to reclaim her children? Would I be willing to give up my grandchildren just as I'd given up my life savings? If Emma proves she can provide a safe, stable home for her children, then that's what's best for them, I said finally. But it would have to be genuine stability, not just promises. Mrs. Patterson made a note, then looked up at me with something approaching sympathy. Mrs. Chen, in my experience, cases like this rarely have simple resolutions. Are you prepared for a long, complicated process? I thought about Sophie asking for math princess stories and Daniel falling asleep in my arms. With complete trust, I'm prepared for whatever it takes. My second visit with the children went better than the first. Sophie was less wary, more willing to engage in conversation. She told me about her favorite books and showed me a drawing she'd made of our family. 4 stick figures labeled me, Daniel, Mommy, and Grandma Barbara. Notably absent was any figure labeled Daddy. Where's your daddy in the picture? I asked gently. Sophie shrugged. He doesn't live with us anymore. He went away after the police came. Michael had abandoned his family. My son-in-law, who'd once called me Mom Barbara and asked about my garden, had fled when things got difficult, leaving Emma to face the consequences of their choices alone. Daniel had warmed up to me considerably, climbing into my lap during story time and babbling what sounded like gamma when he saw me arrive. His trust was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. This child who'd been neglected by his parents was ready to love anyone who showed him consistent attention. "Mrs. Chen," Mrs. Sullivan said as our visit ended, "I wanted you to know that the children's behavior has improved significantly since they started seeing you. Sophie is sleeping better, and Daniel is more interactive during playtime." That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went shopping for someone other than myself. Not at the expensive toy stores I couldn't afford, but at garage sales and thrift shops, looking for books and puzzles and clothes that would fit two small children. At a church rummage sale, I found a set of children's books about a little girl who loves math. The volunteer running the sale, an elderly woman with gentle eyes, refused my money when I explained they were for my grandchildren. "Honey, any grandmother trying to make a home for babies in need deserves all the help she can get," she said, pressing the books into my hands along with a small stuffed elephant she pulled from another box. As I drove home with my modest treasures, I realized something had fundamentally changed in how others saw me. I was no longer just Barbara Chen, the foolish woman who'd given away her life savings and lost her daughter. I was Grandma Barbara, fighting for her grandchildren. It was an identity that came with respect and support I'd never expected. But that evening, as I sat in my apartment organizing tiny clothes and board books, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Mom?" Emma's voice, thinner and shakier than I remembered, but unmistakably my daughter's. Emma. I set down the little dress I'd been folding, my hands trembling. "Where are you?" I'm in a facility, a treatment center. "Mom, I heard about Sophie and Daniel. I heard they're with you." 8 months of silence, and now she was calling because someone else was caring for her children. "They're not with me yet, Emma. I'm going through the approval process. They're in foster care because I know what I did." Her voice cracked. "God, Mom, I know what I did. The money you sent, the house, everything. I messed up so bad." For a moment, I heard echoes of the little girl who used to call me when she'd had nightmares, who'd needed her mother to make everything okay. But that little girl had grown up to become someone who'd stolen my life savings and endangered her children. "Emma, what happened to you? How did you become someone who could do this?" The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if she'd hung up. "I don't know, Mom. I really don't know. But I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to get clean, trying to understand how I became this person who hurt everyone I love." The children, Emma. Sophie is 4 years old and she was taking care of Daniel. A 4-year-old shouldn't have to. "I know." Emma's voice rose, then cracked completely. "I know, and I hate myself for it. Every day I think about what I put them through, what I put you through. Mom, I'm so sorry." An apology. After 8 months of silence, of wondering what I'd done wrong, of grieving not just my money but my daughter, she was finally apologizing. But apologies, I'd learned, didn't undo damage. They didn't restore stolen money or repair broken trust or heal traumatized children. "Emma, I need to know, are you getting clean because you want your children back, or because you actually want to change?" Another long pause. "Both, I think. I want them back so badly it hurts, but Mom, I'm also terrified of the person I became. I need to change for me, not just for them." It was the most honest thing Emma had said to me in years, maybe ever. "How long will you be in treatment?" 90 days minimum, maybe longer. The counselors say addiction recovery isn't something you complete. It's something you work at every day for the rest of your life. I thought about Sophie's careful explanations and Daniel's easy trust, about the way they'd been living while Emma pursued whatever darkness had consumed her. "Emma, I need you to understand something. If I'm approved to care for Sophie and Daniel, I'm not just keeping them temporarily. I'm going to love them and protect them and give them the stability they need. If you get clean and want them back, you're going to have to prove you can be the mother they deserve. I understand. Do you? Because I gave you everything I had, Emma. Everything. And you took it and then erased me from your life. I won't let you do that to your children. Mom. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. Can I ask you something? Why are you willing to take care of them after what I did to you? I looked around my small apartment, at the children's books and clothes I'd been organizing, at the future I was building from the wreckage of the past. Because they're innocent, Emma. And because someone has to love them unconditionally. After Emma hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my apartment, processing the conversation. My daughter was in treatment, possibly getting the help she needed. But the children were still in foster care, still waiting for someone to give them a real home. Tomorrow, I would visit them again. I would read them stories and listen to Sophie's careful questions and let Daniel fall asleep in my arms. I would continue the slow process of building their trust while rebuilding my own life around their needs. Emma's call had answered some questions, but it had raised others. Was she truly committed to recovery, or just saying what she thought? I wanted to hear. Could our relationship ever be repaired after what she'd done? And most importantly, what was best for Sophie and Daniel? As I prepared for bed in my small apartment, I realized that for the first time in 8 months, I wasn't focused on what I'd lost. I was focused on what I might gain, the chance to raise my grandchildren, to give them the love and stability their mother had failed to provide. The woman who'd lost everything was about to discover whether she had the strength to build something beautiful from the ruins. 6 weeks later, I stood in the living room of my new 2-bedroom apartment, watching Sophie help Daniel stack blocks while sunlight streamed through windows I could barely afford. The approval had come through faster than expected. My background was spotless, my determination undeniable, and the children's attachment to me was obvious to everyone involved. "Grandma Barbara," Sophie said, looking up from their game, "when Mommy gets better, will she take us away?" It was the question that haunted my quiet moments. Emma had been calling weekly from treatment, her voice growing stronger, her promises more convincing. But trust, once shattered, doesn't heal on anyone else's timeline. If Mommy gets completely better and can take good care of you, then yes, you might go back to her, I said honestly. But that's only if she proves she can keep you safe. Sophie nodded solemnly. At 4, she understood more about adult failures than any child should. 3 months into our new life together, Emma completed her 90-day program. She called on a Tuesday evening, her voice clear and determined. "Mom, I'm out. I'm clean. I want to see the kids." "Emma, being clean for 3 months isn't the same as being ready to parent." "I know that. I'm not asking to take them back yet. I just want to see them. Please." The supervised visit took place at the children's center where I'd first met Sophie and Daniel. Emma looked thinner, older, but there was a clarity in her eyes that had been missing for years. When Sophie saw her mother, she ran across the room, but stopped just short of reaching her, uncertainty clouding her face. "Hi, Mommy," she said carefully. "Hi, baby," Emma whispered, kneeling down. "I missed you so much." Daniel hung back, clinging to my leg. He barely remembered his mother. For an hour, I watched Emma try to reconnect with children who'd learned to live without her. She was gentle, patient, present in a way I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. But the damage was evident, Sophie's. Careful responses, Daniel's preference for me, the invisible wall trauma had built between them. "She seems different," Jessica observed afterward. "More stable. But the children need time," I finished. "Lots of time." Over the next 6 months, Emma proved her commitment. She found a job, rented a modest apartment, attended AA meetings religiously. She visited the children twice a week, slowly rebuilding bonds that her addiction had severed. The breakthrough came on Sophie's 5th birthday. Emma had brought a homemade cake, chocolate with pink roses, just like the ones I used to make when Emma was small. "I learned how to bake again," Emma said quietly as we watched the children play. "I remembered how you used to let me help measure ingredients." "You were always good at following recipes," I replied. "It was the improvising that got you into trouble." Emma smiled sadly. "Mom, I know I can never give back what I took from you. The money, the trust, the time with the kids. I destroyed so much." I watched Sophie carefully blow out her candles while Daniel clapped his hands in delight. "Emma, what you took was money. What you gave me was them. I don't understand. Before this happened, I was just a lonely old woman counting down the days until retirement. Now I'm Grandma Barbara. I have purpose again, love again. Yes, you hurt me terribly, but you also gave me the greatest gift of my life." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Do you think, could you ever forgive me?" I considered the question that had occupied my thoughts for over a year. "Emma, I forgave you the day I decided to love your children unconditionally. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean trusting blindly again." "I understand. Mom, I want you to know, if the court decides the kids should stay with you permanently, I won't fight it. They're happy with you. Safe. Loved." 6 months later, the family court judge made his decision. Emma would retain parental rights, but the children would remain in my primary custody, with increasing visitation as Emma continued her recovery. It wasn't the reunion Emma had hoped for, but it was the stability Sophie and Daniel needed. Today, 2 years after that first devastating phone call about needing money for a house, I sit in my living room watching my grandchildren, truly mine now, work on homework at the kitchen table. Sophie, now 6, helps Daniel with his alphabet while discussing the math principles in her first-grade worksheets. Emma visits twice a week and calls every night to say goodnight. She's been clean for over a year, working as a graphic designer. Again, slowly rebuilding her life. Our relationship is different now. More honest, more careful, but also more real than it ever was before. The $450,000 is gone forever. But as I watch Sophie explain to Daniel why letters have sounds and numbers have values, I realize something profound. I thought I was giving Emma my life savings to buy her dream house. Instead, I gave her the rope she needed to either hang herself or climb out of whatever pit she'd fallen into. She chose to climb, and in the wreckage of her fall and the slow process of her recovery, I found something I never expected. Not just my grandchildren, but a deeper, more authentic relationship with my daughter than we'd ever had before. Some gifts destroy what they're meant to save. Others save what seems destroyed beyond repair. The trick is learning the difference before it's too late. I gave Emma everything I had, and she threw it away. But in throwing it away, she gave me everything that mattered. Sometimes the most expensive lessons teach us what's truly priceless. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.